All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start in the East Division of the NHL. We've got two very special guests on with us. Jordan Jacklin covers the Buffalo Sabres. Jordan, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Jim. Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. We've got Shane Seney, who covers the Pittsburgh Penguins. Shane, how you doing?
I'm great, Jim. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we're going to start with you guys. We'll do some quick rundowns of your team. I'll let you guys get into way more depth than I'll ever get. And then maybe what we'll do is we'll go through the rest of the teams in the East Division. You guys can weigh in on some of your thoughts on some of that stuff. Does that sound okay?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Sounds amazing.
Jordan, we're going to start with you because Buffalo is the team this year that everybody's talking about heading into the deadline. They are clearly sellers. Obviously, this is not the season that Buffalo wanted to have. GM Kevin Adams has got a lot of work to do, and he's already done a little. He's moved Eric Stahl. Let me get your first reaction on the Eric Stahl trade. I think this has to be an obvious one that we all knew was coming, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially after that 18-game winning streak, it was quite clear that this team, even though they believed they were playoff contenders from the beginning of the season, they had to move on from this player. And they did acquire two assets, which was nice, as we're seeing, as this is a buyer's market, right? So a lot of these players are going for a lot lower values this season than in a previous season. So they honestly did pretty well for themselves in that Eric Stahl trade.
So the return makes me wonder what's coming next, right? Because the big fish, I guess, out of Buffalo is Taylor Hall. Maybe he moves, maybe he doesn't. The recent talk is that he's probably more likely to move than stay. And not long ago, it was considered that it was maybe 50-50 that he was willing to re-sign with Buffalo. That may still be the case, but the talk and the chatter seems to be that Taylor Hall is going to go. So if you consider Eric Stahl's return and then you look at what Buffalo is asking for Hall, which we heard is a first-round pick, one, do you think they're going to get that? And two, do you think he moves before Monday?
Well, honestly, the Kyle Palmieri trade just happened yesterday, and we saw it took two NHL players just to recoup a first-round pick. And Taylor Hall, as a rental, in my opinion, is probably only going to go for a second-round pick and a middling prospect. He's had he just hasn't really had a great season. He's had a lot of historic lows in shooting percentage. He really hasn't been able to live up to his expected goals numbers. He's really had a tough season as a Sabre. It's quite evident too, just watching him play.
Two goals, not what anybody thought was going to happen with Taylor Hall when he came there, right? And Shane's shaking his head down there. I can see him. The idea here was that Taylor Hall was going to come in, and I wouldn't want to say the savior, but maybe put Buffalo in a conversation to be in the playoffs this year. And that combination between Eichel and Taylor Hall, it certainly hasn't worked out this year. My question for you is, do you know, or can you tell, or do you have any idea where Hall might go? I mean, with the Palmieri trade going to the Islanders, we had thought maybe the Islanders were a team that could have been in the running there. What's your take? Do you have any ideas on where you think he'll wind up?
This is a very fascinating situation to me. And honestly, the best fit for him as of right now is the Boston Bruins. And it does seem like they're the front runners to get him. Now, obviously, the cap space is the huge issue here. This is going to have to be a third team involved, even with 50% of his salary retained, which would make his contract only $4 million for the remainder of this season. Boston really has a lot of troubles with 5-on-5 scoring, in terms of their expected goals, actual goals, high danger chances. They're ranked in the bottom third of the entire league in that category. And if you put him on a line with David Krejci, who they've been trying to find wingers for, that's what they acquired Rick Nash a couple of years ago. They tried doing that with Andre Kasha. I think Taylor Hall would really fit well on that team. And obviously there's others like the Vegas Golden Knights. The cap doesn't apply to them. I'm sure they can make it work. Colorado, Toronto is an interesting one too. We keep hearing them. I think Boston probably would be the most likely team to acquire him, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, we know they want secondary scoring, and it goes all the way back to his draft year, right? There was talk between him and Bobby Orr, his agent at the time, being interested in him going to Boston. I mean, we can trace that all the way back. So it wouldn't shock me at all. I'm just wondering, we'll talk about Boston in a second, just how much they're actually going to be buying this year. I don't really know where they are. I'm not sure they even know necessarily what kind of a team they are. So it'll be very interesting to see. Last question for you regarding Buffalo. Do you see anybody else that we should be paying attention to, whether it's Sam Reinhart or Linus Ullmark, or who else in Buffalo should we be watching heading into Monday?
I think it's going to be relatively quiet after the Hall trade. I think a guy like Toby Reeder could go for like a 5th or 6th round pick. And if the front office is really smart here, they should not be trading Linus Ullmark. There are rumors there. And unless the price is astronomical and they can get a really good return, I say you keep your starting goaltender.
Well, we'll be interested to see how much Buffalo does. And it'd be interesting to see how much they can do, right? We all think that they're going to be shopping a lot of pieces, even a Brandon Montour or something like that. We don't know. It's just the cap, the flat cap, all this stuff. It could be a lot of talk and very little action. So we'll see. Shane, let's go on to Pittsburgh here. Let's talk to you about what's going on here. So we've got a new What's Burke's title officially? President?
He's
What is he?
president of hockey operations. Yeah.
Okay, and so we've got Ron Hextall now the new GM. We
Yeah.
know that they want to be active, right? They've said
Mhm.
that they're looking to improve, but they don't necessarily have all the pieces to trade. They don't have a ton of draft picks. They don't have a lot of cap. Like, what do you see Pittsburgh doing, if anything?
Well, they've had a couple of months now to evaluate, so it's now time to execute. But unfortunately, when you don't have the resources, it's going to be hard to do so. So they've come out and said that they're looking for a physical winger. They're looking for a centerman, but at the same time, Jim Rutherford has emptied the cupboards. So they only have a second round pick. I think they have a sixth and a few sevenths this year. So I can't see Burke or Hextall even thinking about trading a draft pick because they haven't gone through a draft yet with the team. But that being said, also a wild card thing that I see is the prospects, because none of them were drafted by Burke, none of them were drafted by Hextall, so they don't really have those ties to them. Whereas, if you've been the GM and you've seen the draft pick develop through a couple of years, maybe you're a little more reluctant to keep them as opposed to letting them go. So I could see them, trying to get a rugged winger, a physical winger, maybe somebody that can slide over to center. They've had a lot of injuries, like every other year, it seems. So if they can find somebody that's versatile to play the wing, play center, and he's not afraid to get into the dirty areas, then I think that's somebody they're looking for.
So you've mentioned those are the pieces that maybe Burke and Hextall are looking for. But if you, as a fan or somebody who covers the team, could make a wish list of who you might want to see Pittsburgh go after, who would be the highest on your list?
Nick Foligno of Columbus would be a nice piece. He can play the wing, kill penalties. Their PK has been terrible this year. And he's, can slide over, play some center. Miles Wood of New Jersey, somebody I like, a big physical guy, plays with speed. You got to have speed if you're playing with Pittsburgh. So he's a guy that I could see. He's got a year left in his contract too. So I don't know how much Burke and Hextall want to make a hockey trade, but he's another guy. One name that seems to be getting talked a lot this trade deadline is Luke Glendening of Detroit. Face-off specialist, and the Penguins, they need that. And when you have Malkin back, who should be back soon, McCann will slide down to that third center. And I don't know if you want to have Glendening and, sell off a couple prospects for a fourth line center that might not move the needle. But he's somebody that can kill penalties and win those key draws. So somebody that's certainly on the radar for sure. And I think he's only making 1.8 last year of his deal. It's the kind of guy you can sneak in under the cap at the deadline.
Do you think Pittsburgh's going to be really active here? Like, is this a situation where we've got a new GM, we've got a new president, we've got some aging players, we've got some injuries going on here? Is this a lot of talk and maybe not a lot of action? Or do you think that Pittsburgh actually kind of swings for it here and tries to make a deal here before Monday?
I think Burke was pretty open right away, saying that, we're going to win now. We're not going to, the Crosby trade rumors and all that jazz went down pretty quick when they took over. And I think it's mostly talk, to be honest. I think it's going to be quiet just because they don't have much to work with. And the fact is they don't really want to mortgage too much of the future when really they don't have much to deal with anyway. So I think they'll take the rest of the year to evaluate. If they do anything, it'll be small. Don't expect a blockbuster deal out of Pittsburgh. Not at all.
Awesome. Okay. Let's move on to a couple other teams that you guys don't specifically cover. Neither do I, but we can talk about a little bit. We talked about Boston. I'll get you guys to weigh in on some of this. So here's how I see it. And let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me, or have another opinion here. We know secondary scoring is probably high on their priority list. They've got some injuries that they're dealing with. They've got Rask, who's got some nagging stuff going on. Charlie McAvoy, Brandon Carlo. So and like I said before, I don't really know what Boston is going to do. Are they buying? Because they're kind of in that fourth position. They may be a team that gets bounced early, but they could also be a team that goes on a bit of a run. Jordan, what do you see? Do you see Boston as buyers, standing pat? What do you see them doing? I mean, you mentioned Taylor Hall might be a fit there. That would make them buyers. What are you thinking?
Oh, they're totally buyers. Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand aren't getting any younger, so you got to try to win a cup in their prime just as much as you can. There's a short window here. It's closing soon.
Yeah, Shane, I was going to ask you the same question. Considering the age of some of these players and most of that scoring comes in from that top line, do you see Boston being active, trying to fit and get some depth there? Or are they just going to ride that horse all the way through the playoffs if they can?
Well, if the asking price is pretty low for Taylor Hall, I think that's somebody they're definitely going to be interested in. Another name to consider too is a depth defenseman, Jamie Oleksiak from Dallas. They lost that Chara presence for the playoffs, and he's a big body that's has playoff experience, and he's not scared to drop the gloves. So good guys to have for on your side for the playoffs.
Let's move to the other side of the coin here. Talk about the New Jersey Devils for a second. So we've seen them sell already. We know they've moved Kyle Palmieri, they've moved Travis Zajac. What else do you think they're going to sell? Shane, I'll start with you. Do you see New Jersey being way more active prior to Monday, or was this it? Was this the big move for that team?
I think they might be active. They have a couple of pieces on defense that, Ryan Murray, even I know PK Subban's name's come up in the last few weeks, but I think they'll be active. They got a couple of pieces there. They really haven't put it together. They had big high expectations this year and never really materialized. I think the Corey Crawford news set them off kind of early, but I could see them doing something. I could see them maybe
Jordan,
more of a hockey deal. Sorry, but more of a hockey
problem.
deal than anything else. But I think they'll be active for sure.
Do you think they're going to be moving everything not nailed down, and at least not in their really young core? Not named Hughes, not named Heischer, things like that, Jordan?
Oh, yeah, totally. And a name I've heard a lot is Dmitry Kulikov, surprisingly. For a third pairing defender, I've heard his name linked to multiple teams. I think they're going to get probably like a 4th or 5th round pick for that type of player.
Yeah, they should be able to restock pretty good. Okay, let's move on to the Islanders. They added Palmieri. We had heard they were going to be on some stuff. The big deal here is that Anders Lee's gone down, right? That's why they've got all this cap space, and that's why they can do some stuff. Do you think this was it? Like Palmieri was their big move? Jordan, I'll start with you. Is that the guy, or is Lou Lamoriello still got other stuff up his sleeve here?
Yeah, I think this is probably it for this team. Pierre LeBrun was speculating that he also believed Nick Foligno was a guy that Lou would want to acquire, but you got 2 players here in this deal. They have an abundance of forward depth now. I think this team's probably good. Maybe a depth defender if they can squeeze it in there.
Do you agree there, Shane?
Yeah, I do. Depth defender for sure. It seems when they got Zajac with Palmieri, I was kind of shocked, to be honest. I think they're definitely just stick with D. Looks like they got their forward group ready to go.
The New York Rangers seem like a team to me that is normally active, but might not be very active this year. Jordan, do you see them being quiet? Do you see them doing stuff? Is there anything to really take of note out of the Rangers organization?
Well, it's interesting because the Rangers contributor here at THW, Brandon Adsop, actually wrote an article recently about Julien Gautier's future with the team. And he's kind of actually been a decent player when he actually gets a chance to play. But as we know with David Quinn, he likes to kind of sit his prospects, So I could see them potentially moving him to get him some change of scenery. But besides that, it doesn't really seem like they're going to be doing too much there.
I saw, Shane, that the fourth period was talking about Alexander Georgiev today. I don't know how much truth there is to that at all. Can you possibly see them moving a goalie?
No, they have a luxury there with 2 young guys, on the cheap. So that's something that a lot of teams would, jealous of and would love to have. One name that just always seems to be linked to the Rangers is Jack Eichel. Maybe that's a summer deal. I don't think that much going to happen before the deadline. Don't get me wrong, but I could see them visiting that in the summer. And if he is available and that's the route the Sabres want to take, of course, Jordan might know more than me, but that could be a name that you see go there, but sometime in the summer.
All right, Jordan, I'll give you 15 seconds. What do you think happens with Jack Eichel? Obviously, probably not this year, but do you see him being moved next or in the summer or next year?
I think if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be the New York Rangers. That's what I'll say about that.
Well, you guys aren't too far off. Okay, Washington seems like maybe a buyer to me, but I don't really know what they could buy. They've got maybe Henrik Lundqvist coming back. If possible, he might play this season. It's a goalie, maybe, right? Like, are we in agreement that might be what they're looking for?
I agree 100%. If Lundqvist isn't coming back, which, hey, that could be the story of the year if he does. But if he doesn't come back, I see David Rittich from Calgary. They're out of the playoffs. So pending free agent, somebody they could get on the cheap, especially if some salaries retained. Because, they don't have too much money to work with. But I could see them adding a goalie, yeah.
Jordan, do you think that the Rangers owe this team anything? Because nobody expected them to be this good. It's not like they're wonderful, but they certainly weren't expected to be a fantastic team coming into this season. Do they owe it to the players to maybe add something?
Yeah, I mean, if it's available and it's relatively cheap, it's really good to reward the group there, and it really establishes a good culture if they can at least get maybe some type of extra forward for secondary scoring.
Okay, so I haven't heard a ton coming out of Philadelphia, other than maybe Scott Laughton's name being potentially moved. Jordan, I'll start with you. Any comments on that? You think that's a deal that's going to happen before Monday?
Yeah, I've heard some interesting theories about that, and I think he could be a fit with the Pittsburgh Penguins actually.
Mhm.
But the problem with those two teams is it's pretty difficult to make a trade. Even the Mark Streit trade a few years ago acquired a third team, so that won't be an easy negotiation process.
Okay, well, Shane, let me throw this at you then. We already seen an in-division trade between New Jersey and New York Islanders. Does that rule out the possibility of Pittsburgh dealing with Philadelphia? I know there could be a third team involved here, but is this season totally throw all that stuff out the window?
Yeah, it's you never know for sure, but I don't think it's going to happen. And given that there would be a chance that a third team would be required, I just don't think Hextall and Burke have that up their sleeve. But as far as Lawton's game goes, like hey man, I should have mentioned him earlier, but he would fit the bill absolutely perfectly. So I know he wants to be a Flyer though, and he's hoping to sign a long term there. So we'll see if they end up selling him before the deadline. But I could see him circling back to Philly afterwards.
Awesome. And any final comments, anything that we might have missed before we close the book here on the East Division?
It's it's still close. Like there's you have your top four, but there's still Philly on the outskirts there that maybe they don't want to sell a guy like Lawton or who knows. But it should be interesting down the stretch. And if I had to say, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I think Pittsburgh or potentially Washington come out of the division.
What about you, Jordan? Any final comments on this East Division?
It's interesting because the middling teams in this division are really going to be establishing their identities after this trade deadline, like a team like the Philadelphia Flyers, New York Rangers. So, in a division that's kind of all over the place, we'll see some of the true identities of these teams after this Monday's trade deadline.
Awesome. Well, Jordan, Shane, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you guys coming on to talk about your teams and some of the East Division.